computer. Good morning, fellas. Here we are in the Gospel of John, and we'll continue this morning. Good to see everybody join in, and it is getting lighter. I look right over my left shoulder, and spring is coming, which is wonderful. Let's move right into the text. This week's a little different because we had such an amazing verse last week. I want to spend a little time in review. That verse is verse 51. Truly, truly, Jesus says the amen, amen. I say to you, if anyone follows my word, he will never see death. Bill, there's one of those things. What is he talking about there? He will never see death, right from the words of Jesus. So we looked at that, and here's a summary. There's a bondage. The word death, the way Jesus uses it, the way I believe the New Testament writers, especially Paul, uses it, it's liquid, or some people say elastic. It moves, it bends. Certainly, physical death is part of it. But as we look at the scriptures as a whole, even in Genesis 3, death is spoken of in a different context, and that's what we're looking in a different way. And here it is. It's a bondage, lack of life, a death which exists, all three depicting the same thing, which exists as the natural state of humankind. Note, this is important. Jesus is talking with people who have believed in him. Now, I will backtrack that a little bit. In John, I think John 5, he who passes from death to life, I have tended to look at that as a one-time prayer pointing to a salvation experience. Not arguing that. However, when Jesus talks about it, it's in the now. It's right now that he's talking about. And there is a death aspect. People can be very alive, but dead. And Jesus is talking about a passage from that state, believer or not, he's talking to believers here, to a state of life. And he is, of course, the bringer of life. Through his invitation, and I look at that word invitation as something that can occur on a daily basis, sometimes moment by moment, one can live in an entirely different life state. Notice the term right now. We could therefore illustrate what he is saying like this. We're going to use that word freedom. Freedom, as he states previously, is one descriptor of this new life. So freedom is a word he uses to equate, to describe what life, one aspect of what life looks like. And you've seen this slide with freedom moving around the screen. Notice it says his desired experience for all. I'm using the word experience because it is a in the moment applied trust is what we're talking about. Freedom. The term freedom suggests the aspect that I think is illustrating is hindrance-free ability to move at will. And where I get that is the natural state of us as human beings is that we are self-bound by our own constructs, our own ways of thinking. And Jesus, through trust in him, applied trust in the moment, we are freed. It's like freed from bondage, like these little pegs here show. At the moment, as we trust, we're released to really see things clearly. That's coming up. Therefore, following his word, stated elsewhere as being his disciple, is realized through applied trust. There's that word, trust right now. And that's what it says. This always involves a letting go, which always feels like dying. And I saw that hand on my screen, Dave. So hang on just a minute. Through this practice, I experienced what it means to never see death. And then, it is, and this is the good news. I think this is what we're being called to. And you're going to see the little pegs disappear through applied trust, and then the freedom, illustrated through moving around on the screen. So there you go. There's my little, I had fun with the animation. So Dave, what are your thoughts?
Well, I thought of this last week too, and didn't raise it. I keep recalling as a very graphic and dramatic example, I think, of what you're talking about is the scene from Braveheart, where Braveheart is being filleted by the king in front of the crowd. And he finally gets to the point of shouting, screaming to the people, the word freedom.
Yeah. Boy, that is graphic. That is a graphic picture. Bill's got a comment. Somebody else has one too. Bill, go ahead.
Just real quick, just to add to the confusion. I got this Young's literal translation of verse 51, and it just says, "Verily, verily, I say to you, if anyone may keep my word, death he may not see, to the age." It sounds like Yoda talking, but it's just an interesting turn on it, And
that's interesting, because it would really, he's imposing, his theological construct onto that verse. Age doesn't exist there, but it's fine. And that's fine. He's trying to bring clarity, and I applaud that. So John 52 through 55. This is long enough. Would one of you guys read this, either from the screen or from your text, and whatever translation is fine? Would one of you lead out?
I'll take it on.
Then the Jewish people said to him, "Now we know that you have a demon. Abraham and the prophets died, but you are saying, if someone should keep my word, he would not ever taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died? And the prophets died. What do you make of yourself?" Yeshua answered, "If I shall glorify myself, then it is not my glory. My Father is the one who glorifies me, whom you are saying that he is our God. And you have not known him, but I do know him. And if I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word."
All right. Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. So we're looking at these 52 through 55. And first of all, we've got the crowd's process. And here's where I added a little more review, because I want you to see the process. It starts back in verse 33, and the sideways triangle, the V there, is depicting a what would I call it? They're painting themselves, they're putting themselves into a box, and that box constraint gets further as the crowd moves to the right. So here we are in the first instance, and the crowd is saying, "We are Abraham's descendants," and they're they're pointing. I'm referencing the pointing, the confinement, and they're using, I'm summarizing, first person bolstering. They perceive Jesus as a threat, and their counteraction is to bolster themselves, to bolster their position by stating their position. I've been guilty of that many times. The second movement, the constraints are getting even closer. The box is getting smaller, and they're saying now Abraham is our father. Another way of saying the same thing, I'm sure there's nuances there. We probably talked about it. First person bolstering is the methodology. Then they move, again, constraints get smaller. And then he says, they say, "We were not born of sexual immorality. We have one Father, God himself." They move from Abraham to God. And I think they're using some indirect mudslinging towards Jesus because of his birth. That's my opinion. I share that with other people. And then And then they move to the fourth mention is in verse 48. See how the progression. The Jews answered and said to him, do we not rightly say that you are a Samaritan and you have a demon? So Samaritan and demon, again, referencing his past, this would be direct mudslinging. There it is. They just go to mudslinging. They're done with bolstering. You know, once you get to God, you can't go any higher. So they had to figure out something else. I just look at these guys as getting tighter and tighter and reaching for whatever they can to make themselves feel better about themselves. And Jesus is over here. He's not picking a fight at all. They're boxing themselves in. That's what this is about in my mind. And now we go to 5, the fifth mention of this crowd. Now we know they have gone from 4 points of accusation to now a conclusion. Now we know, and that is a derived conclusion. They have concluded that you have, Jesus, a demon. And I call that a judgment. That is, in my opinion, a really good example right here in front of us, what a judgment looks like. They built this in their heads, this untruth. They built that whole thing and they derived a judgment, which will then inform their decisions for the future that we'll see based on a fallacy. So here we go. The crowd now extrapolates their judgment. And here we have the judgment. And what we're going to see is how they extrapolated all of what's in the yellow highlight. They made this judgment, you have a demon. And then they go off on this monologue. Abraham died and the prophets as well. And yet you say, if anyone follows my word, he will never taste of death. You are not greater than our father Abraham, who died, are you? The prophets died too. Whom do you make yourself out to be? They quickly derive this entire monologue in their heads, and one person evidently speaks out. And I think this is absolutely amazing. And it's a commentary on how I think, how I can build a false perception, a false judgment on false perception. And then I wrote a little note here. It's amazing how fast they did it. It's amazing. And I think it shows us how efficient our binary minds work. I think it's part of being human. Certainly, if we're building rocket ships, we want to have a binary mind that's really moving and can making decisions. If we're at a stoplight or a train signal, we want to activate that aspect of our heads to stop the car in the correct place, so we don't have a disaster. There is a place for that, but not here. And there is where they're falling short. Jesus responds with this statement, and he answered, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. Okay, we've kind of looked at this before. It is my Father who glorifies me. Now, this statement is indirectly referencing a commonly held ideal between Jesus and the crowd that the truth must be confirmed through a minimum of 2 corresponding testimonies. We still look at that today. We still hold that as valid. If 2 people have the same story, then you really ought to listen to them. Jesus states that there exists what I'm calling a bi-directional glorification between the Father and the Son. Glorification at oneness. That's how we get the word atonement. A synchrony, glorification, meaning a cohesive type of respect and interaction one for the other. Really a unification these are words that come to my mind as I think of the word glorification. I didn't go any deeper than that. So we have the Son and we have the Father, and we have glorification from the Son to the Father. I only do what I see the Father doing. I'm here to honor him. I am from the Father. I'm going back to the Father. These are words out of the Gospel of John. Here we see Jesus stating that the Father glorifies the Son. And I think that is absolutely amazing. And I'm pasting over the top what truly is. They are speaking from and living out of exactly the same source, which is the one source, the one reality of what they represent. That Jesus shows us how to live within that. This is eye-popping, and it provides insight into the relationship, this intimacy of relationship between the Son and the Father. And I would say even more so, I mean, that's eye-popping in itself, but even more so, what we as Christ followers are being invited into. And I'm basing that a lot on John 17 as I'm thinking about this, that Jesus and the Father, Jesus in his prayer in John 17, there's a oneness that exists within this relationship between the Son and the Father that we're seeing right here stated. And Jesus is praying that all who believe would be invited into this same thing, or experience this same oneness. And I think that is absolutely amazing. Jesus, then he goes on in 54 and 55, Jesus references the crowd's perspective. Now he's responding. He says, if I glorify myself, we already looked at that, my glory is nothing, my Father glorifies me. And then he adds in part B of 54, the crowd says he is our God. We saw that earlier in a prior slide. They are claiming that they are sons of Abraham. Abraham is their father, and that they are of God. And then Jesus goes on and states from his perspective what that means. He says, let's see here. I'll comment on this first. Jesus now states back to the crowd their own claim, 841. And there it is, 841, that we are of God. In verse 55, he continues to emphasize what I'm calling the relational disconnect between the crowd's current state and Jesus. We're talking apples and oranges. What the crowd thinks and what truly is are far apart. And we've seen this over and over, illustrated through the triangle. And here it is illustrated yet another way. We have on the left, Jesus is speaking from this perspective of a cohesive relationship with the Father, the word glorification as part of that, and speaking out of what truly is the one reality of which the crowd is invited into. And on the right is what the crowd thinks. And what the crowd thinks at this juncture is that you have a demon, and they're asking the question, who are you making yourself out to be? They are thinking they are right on, exactly where they need to be, and they couldn't be further from the truth. And so what's interesting, what's interesting, what I want you to see is they are pushing themselves away from this through their own constructs, their own stubbornness, their own ways of thinking. Their refusal to let go of all of that is driving them further away. Jesus is staying right here, right there where he is, but they are pushing themselves away. So today, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about it. You know, we've seen the process towards and conclusive nature of judgment. We've really seen a picture of what judgment looks like and how judgment is derived. We've also seen how quickly and efficiently the binary mind derives a conclusion. And I look at this statement right here, feeding back to here. This conclusion is their judgment. You have a demon. These people are saying that Jesus the Christ has a demon. Why? Because they think so. The outcome is that the crowd has built a concise and clear conclusion on something that they refuse to let go of. That is sourced entirely within their collective head. Jesus is not doing this to them. They are doing it to themselves. And they're extrapolating on these falsities, these lies that he calls them lies, that he calls them a liar because they're speaking out of falsity. And this is common. It's common in I've done it hundreds or maybe thousands of times. I don't know. I've done this same thing. And it has to do with being human. And so today, what we'd like to do is talk about this idea of judgment, deriving falsities. And the question to the group, to all of us, is what ways can you think of where you've witnessed this common scenario, either from your own experience or being part of that? I don't have to look very far.
Mike, I found it interesting in my translation. Let's see, what verse was it? It says, your translation said, who are you making yourself out to be? Mine says, who do you think you are? And I see that so many times, and I feel like this is a defense mechanism that the crowd is using. Yeah. Christ has basically shot a barb at them saying, you don't know God, because you're accusing me of these things. So obviously you don't know God. So their defense mechanism is to put their hands out and say, who do you think you are to tell us who we are? And we see that all the time in society today, that if somebody disagrees with you, and you talked about it in there where they mudsling, that's the typical way that people argue today, is they start to argue their point, but as soon as you disagree with them and it becomes threatening to them, then the next thing is to start calling you names. You're a bigot, you're a this, you're a that, because you don't believe the way I do. And we're all guilty of it. We do the same thing. If somebody disagrees with us, we start with an argument that we think is logical, but if they continue to disagree, then we go, okay, well, you're just an idiot or whatever, so we start pushing back the same way. I think it's human nature, and it's that binary mind that you talked about, that we may start with a logical argument, but as soon as somebody continues to disagree with us or vice versa, the next thing that happens is people start throwing names out there at you.
That's really a good summary of that, Jeff. And I want to ask you a question. If and I agree with that. I've been guilty of that too many times. If that scenario is allowed to play, let's say in a close relationship, what is the natural ramification of that over time? That going toe to toe, that attempting at the mudslinging, whatever defense mechanism we employ, where does that lead in human communication over time with the same person?
Well,
This
that's-
isn't a trick question. It's a discussion question. Yeah.
right. And I've seen that. And excuse me, my wife and I have been through, excuse me, counseling before. That the more that happens, that more of that name calling or that judgment toward the other person, that person starts to build up a wall, brick by brick by brick by brick. And that wall at some point stops the communication that's necessary for that relationship to continue the way it's supposed to. And until you can find some ways to take those bricks down, then that relationship is going to suffer from a lack of heart-to-heart type of communication. There's no way to communicate and make that right until that wall starts coming down. And the way that wall starts coming down is for each of them to admit their part in it and begin to be able to ask for forgiveness and clear that wall.
Well, if you could, you've got a future in counseling yourself. Maybe Steve could, Steve's had a lot of training in that. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Steve, but do you have any thoughts do you have any thoughts to add to what Jeff is saying?
Well, obviously you're in touch with something here, Jeff, that is, it's sort of obvious and yet it escapes us. I would add to it that there's oftentimes a sort of an emotional driver behind this. And maybe it comes back to those circles that you presented, Mike. We end up feeling threatened, and I use the word feeling there deliberately. And we react in ways to in a sense protect ourselves from a certain feeling, that feeling of being threatened.
No, let me comment on that, Steve. Thanks for referring to the circles, because that's certainly one intent, is to give us a graphic of how this works, or at least one way. What I'm hearing you say, Steve, is that, Jeff is talking about people doing negative wall building towards the other person. What I say is causing the other to move into that realm of self-defense and lay another brick. Is it possible for a prior situation to be in a person's life, and I'm thinking you're hitting on this, Steve, where it's not the person really at all, but the person themselves are being informed and have already built bricks, and they're filtering what you're saying through their own false constructs. Thus, they don't hear a word you're saying, or very little of what you're saying. But do you understand what I'm asking?
I think so, and I say yes. Our previous experiences of being threatened, whether it's physically threatened or threatened with being labeled as wrong or inadequate, those come into play in the present situation.
Yeah.
I'll never go there again, so to speak. I won't be put in that corner again.
Yeah.
I won't be boxed in again and threatened.
I think Bill, I'm going to hold my comment. I'm so sorry. What did you have to say? Bill, go ahead. You've been patiently waiting.
I thought I lowered my hand, but I didn't. It seems, well, there's a bunch of stuff spinning, but this ties into a racism, which is a subset of tribalism. That if I am threatened by your argument, instead of debating the merits of the argument, I'm going to assign you to a tribe. I'm going to assign you to some character, whether you're gay or you're socialist or you're black or you're Jehovah's Witness or I'm going to assign you a tribe to disqualify your statements. And then once I do that, the argument's over with. Of course, I can't listen to you. You're one of those, and that happens a lot, especially now. Liberal, conservative, open the door. That's instead of the argument, you're smearing the person. But I have a second issue here.
Yeah.
Jesus is defending himself, saying, I have two witnesses. God glorifies me. And I'm missing a piece of information. And the piece of information is, was there a concrete, when he said God glorifies me, was there a concrete event where his healings or something was there that he could lean on to show that God glorified him? Otherwise, he's just making a subjective statement that I can't find a way of validating.
Yeah, great question. Hey, Carl, you're feeding back to us, I believe. Could you mute your thing, your phone? I'm
Okay.
I don't know if the rest of you are hearing that, but I think it's Carl's phone. So yeah.
Oh, Carl. Jeez.
Yeah, we like you, Carl.
Sorry about that.
We like
Hey.
you. We don't see you, but we like you when we don't see you, and we like you when we see you. But we do wish you would mute your phone. Thank you. Comment on Bill's comment. Any questions?
Okay.
I agree with Bill. Of course, I
I'm gonna go.
relate to it very much.
Tread on
For
those tires.
the longest time, I did not go to church and did not enjoy church because I spent my time critiquing the preacher. I knew what I believed to be true,
There's a penny.
and I knew it well. And when I heard
Yeah.
somebody talking on any given passage, I would say, that's not what that passage, in my head,
Yeah.
that's not what that passage means. It's like, what the heck, who put you up there, and why are we even here?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not what I would have said, and that and went on. And I never really got any benefit of being in the community of believers and under the tutelage of some guy preaching. I just was sat there and you've got a devil. And then at some point, and I couldn't tell you when, at some point my mind flipped
It takes us in
to
there. I can
he doesn't need to be wrong for me to be right. I'm gonna kind of add into what I believe to be true, his way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Because I just thought it was either all or nothing. It was either my way or you're wrong. But then I started to think in terms of, this guy's a sound-minded human being. I mean, he can read. He's got the Bible like I have the Bible. He's going to it. He's endeavoring to know God. This is what he's concluded to be true. He's presenting it to me. Why should I just blow it off as being wrong? Let me take it in, ponder it, chew on it a while, consider what I say, and the Lord give the understanding, kind of deal. And it made for me a more pleasant understanding of Scripture. Feedback, I understand, but one of the things that stopped me initially from doing that was the belief that a multifaceted belief system was no belief system at all. When people would give me the idea that if you believe everything, you'll believe anything.
Yeah.
And I got over that. It's like, there is no neat capsule of truth that this is the beginning and end of it. Anything strays from these borders is wrong.
Yeah.
I don't believe that anymore.
Yeah. Thanks, Vince. Yeah. Yeah. I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, were we all believe?
Bill, to take a stab at maybe from a little different perspective, the way I understand your part B of your question is that where we see Jesus glorifying verbally, we can see the one arrow moving from Son to Father and glorification. But where do we see the Father glorifying the Son? And or how do we see it? And is that your question? Yep. Yeah. So let's take a stab at that, fellas. Yeah, I mean, we can look at other parts of scripture, and that's valid. What comes to your mind, fellas, when you hear that question? Why would Jesus say this? And what basis is there for him saying this? That would be the better question. What basis is he using?
Well, there were miracles performed, and there were healings and attributed to him. I mean, there is a track record of doing extraordinary stuff.
Well, and Mike, I don't know which passage in scripture it is, but where they accused Jesus of casting out demons by the power of Beelzebub or whatever, the devil basically casting out his own demons. And Christ's argument was, if that is true, then that house will collapse, basically.
Yeah.
A house divided against itself. So maybe this is something similar, that they were accusing him of having a demon, and his argument is that if God were not glorifying me, if God were not doing this, then I couldn't do it, because nobody's gonna cast out demons in the name of demons. Because then that house will collapse. So maybe he's in reference to some of those accusations when he says, no, that's not true. God is glorifying me, and the mere fact that I can cast down demons is proof that God is glorified.
Yeah. So there is an example through his works.
There's a verse out there where someone said, if the Messiah came, wouldn't he do these kind of works? In other words, my thinking is very concrete here. If Jesus said, God glorified me, it has to be through things that they could touch or see or observe.
Yeah. Well, we do know from the text, I mean, we do have, we could go through the gospel accounts outside of John and look at, what do you call it? The baptism of Jesus. This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. That's valid. And of course, we're living 2,000 years later, and we have the full embodiment. We're looking at that, and we can say, well, of course, this rings true. But I think, Bill, your question is, what about at this context right here with this crowd? What evidence is there? What evidence is present? One that I see is they don't contest it. They contest him as having a demon. Well, let's see. How would I say that? They're definitely contesting him as having a demon, but they're not. But they don't reference. What are you talking? They don't say, "What are you talking about here?"
But they're
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, they say he has a demon is sort of an acquiescence to he's doing something spectacular, and they have to discredit it.
Yeah.
So there's something going on that's glorifying him. He says, what's glorifying you is this demon. It can't be God, because it just can't be God, because it disagrees with our constructs.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Now we could go and move ahead into the next chapter, but Jesus removes himself from this place, where the works of the healing of the blind man in chapter 9. But again, that's outside the context of right here. So any other comments on that?
Yeah, Mike, I went back a little bit into chapter 7. And this whole argument seems to have started when Jesus healed somebody on the Sabbath. And their argument was, you're doing work on the Sabbath, so you can't be of God. And that's where we start through all of these arguments about who Jesus is.
Wow. Okay.
And he goes back in there and he says, anyway, let's see where to go with Moses, or with let's see, I just lost it now. Sorry. Says, I did one miracle and you were all amazed. Yeah, because Moses gave you circumcision, though actually it did not come from Moses, but from the patriarchs. You circumcise a boy on the Sabbath. Now, if a boy can be circumcised on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses may not be broken, why are you angry with me for healing a man's whole body on the Sabbath? Stop judging by mere appearances, but judge correctly. So then they start going into all these arguments about how Jesus can't be who he says he is, because it seems to me from this one miracle, and maybe Christ is referring back to this miracle, saying, "Hey, this is God glorifies me because I was able to do this miracle, even though you're not judging it properly because you're setting it up against the law to make me look like it's wrong to do a miracle, kind of thing." So I don't know if this is where it was that all of this started, but it seems like all these headings in my Bible all refer to dispute over this, dispute over this, dispute over this. And I think that was the kind of the jumping off point with that.
So, okay, thank you for taking that stab, Jeff. Really appreciate it. And that very well could be it. Certainly feeds into it. Isn't there some place here? So that's miracles. That's about miracles and miracles being conducted or being carried out in a lawful sense. What about sin? Isn't it somewhere here in chapter 8 where he says, who of you accuses me of sin? Isn't that near here? I'm working in about 4 or 5 different places, so I forget where I am, but I know I'm here somewhere. And my point is, if you can find that, is that he turns the table with that statement and says, who of you accuses me of sin? You know, we saw this crowd would have known, I believe they would have witnessed the healing of the woman.
Hey, Carl, we really need to get your microphone off.
Sorry.
We're picking up all of your background sound, and it's making it hard on some of us over here.
He that accuses me of sin, that could be, that could be part of it, turning the table back to them. Any other thoughts?
Well, yeah, it's important to remember, I believe, if we go back to the middle of John 7, that this is all happening in one long discourse at the Feast of Tabernacles.
Yeah, it is.
If we get too fragmented, we kept thinking, well, this verse is 17 months detached from that verse. No, this is one long exchange going back and forth. So it's okay to go forward to try to get reference to what they're talking about, because they're hanging on a lot of words that have been said previously.
Yeah. That's good. Well, I don't have a definitive answer for your question. I think it's a great question. On the other hand, I don't see the crowd refuting that specifically. They're really set on him having a demon. They have made a judgment, and in a sense, in their humanness and their acting out of their judgment, that's all they see. I think we would all agree that certainly now, looking back onto the text from the year 2022 and what we now understand, of course, the Father glorifies the Son and the Son glorifies the Father. Of course, there's a bi-directional glorification there. But man, what a mouthful that he would say that. So,
can I add something, Mike?
Of course, yes.
I can't balance, but I heard somewhere someone said, even in some contexts, like Jim and Tammy Faye Baker PTL program, people got healed.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you do with that? Is that glorifying them? Was it not glorifying? It's like, wow. How do you go there. I just threw that in because this is a tough question on
Yeah, that really is.
validation.
Yeah, it really is a tough question. And I made reference to that from my own experience where in a demonology kind of context, going through a certain kind of scenario to cast out a demon, I have witnessed on numerous occasions. And I said, and sometimes it works. You know, what do you do with that? You know what? That's why there's a lot of mystery in this whole thing. You know, it's pretty big.
I think a lot of times I never did, but as I'm beginning to ponder it as you are, I'm just attributing it to, well, it'll work then, you know, and rather than being in the I'm of Paul, I'm of Cephas, I'm of this, I'm of that, you know, to pick a front man to worship, you know, this Jim and Tammy Baker, this happened on their program, so they must be responsible for it. Or this happened on Jimmy Swaggart's campground thing.
Yeah.
And so this must be him. So that's endorsing what he's saying.
Yeah.
That, I mean, that's a reasonable assumption to come to, you know, you attribute it to the guy in the front with the microphone. But I think as I've grown, I don't anymore. It's like, I don't understand why some guy in the Ganges goes down into the water and comes up not a leper. I haven't a clue how that happened.
Yeah.
But it did, and praise the Lord, you know. It's
I think what you're saying, if I understand you, and having something work does not have the weight that it once did to me.
It doesn't. It's not
it doesn't
an endorsement.
impress me. It doesn't impress me like it once did. Yeah.
Well, I'm impressed if a guy grows a hand.
Yeah, that would be impressed. Yeah.
You know, but to attribute that growth of the hand to the doctrinal sentence that's in front of it.
Yeah.
It's like this is the proof that your $3 that you mailed to me worked.
Right. Yeah.
You know, grow your hand, you know, and you know, that's something Houdini might do. I mean, no wonder they said you've got a devil, you know, because I think what they're doing is they're attributing, or perhaps they're attributing it to a person rather than the grace of God. This is just the love of God in manifestation.
Regardless of what is said. Yeah.
Yeah, or who's talking at the moment. This is God doing what God does. He heals people, he loves people, he saves people, you know.
And that's a bigger context. I think that in this text here, boy, we've taken a lot of time with here watching this crowd in their process. Remember my little thing? I mean, I think in pictures. So I am just so enamored how this crowd builds this box with increasingly constraining space depicted by the triangle, and it's all in their heads. It's all manufactured by what they're coming up with, bits and pieces, but they put bits and pieces together falsely, and the whole thing culminates towards the end of chapter 8 with this very clear judgment. Now we know you have a demon. You know, we have slowed this process down immensely over a course of weeks. And where my mind goes to on this whole thing is not so much the them and me, they're the bad guys, I'm the good guy, but no, it's I can identify with that process of where I don't feel bad about it. It's human nature. I just realize how prone I am to the same process. I think these people are normal people, and they've got biases, they've got fears, Steve, that you've taught, you know, fears, and they're working out of this falseness that's inside of them as part of being human, and they just haven't dealt with it yet. And this is what it looks like.
You know, Mike, it seems like to me here are what we're plagued with in terms of our humanity, I'll label it that way, is if we can figure this out, if we can figure out how going into the Ganges River works, or if we can figure out how Jim and Tammy Faye did it, or
Yeah.
if we can, we don't have to move through those circles that you presented.
Yeah.
We can get there without, in a sense, the faith and the trust that God is asking us
Yeah.
to accept as part of the mystery of who He is and who we are.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of our human nature, is we want to figure it out, and then we can be free of the anxiety and the fear.
It's like we want a pass. We want to move to the front of the line without having to bypass what's necessary for me internally in order to get there. And that what's free is I got to learn to let go. I got to learn to die to self. I got to learn to release control. And in that release, I get clarity. That's what the circles are telling us. And man, I would do just about anything except that, Steve. If I can get a pass and move to the front of the line and figure out how Tammy Baker does it and how, how it all works, man, I could bottle it and sell it.
Yeah. And I think these folks wanted to have something bottled that they could sell.
Yeah.
And we're there too.
That's the key thing, is I'm there too, naturally.
Simon the Sorcerer tried that, I adjure thee in the name of Jesus that Paul preaches, come out of him. It's like, who the hell are you? I never heard of you.
Yeah.
He thought it was a methodology. If I say the right words or the right way, I'll get the same results. It doesn't work that way.
Before we sign off, I have a tangential thought that just struck me. Some people said, well, it's often referred that the only two books of the Bible that refer to Jesus' virgin birth is Matthew and Luke. And I think I think this passage contains element of the virgin birth too, because indirectly, because of their smearing him for being a Samaritan and we're not illegitimate and all that stuff. They're beating up on him because they don't think he came out of a virgin birth. And the text of this is kind of, it's sort of it's interesting.
Well, I go down that trail myself. I think they are indirectly referring to him. Some people think that, some people don't, but I think it makes sense. So, well,
hey, Mike, I had
go ahead.
Through all the counseling and stuff we've done and stuff, a lot of the conflict that arises in people's lives is due to unmet expectations. So this crowd had an expectation of what the Messiah was going to be. Christ has obviously missed their expectations. Yeah. So their thought process starts down that road. This can't be who he says he is, because he's not meeting our expectations. And that starts this whole road, like you said, where everything funnels down to mudslinging. But it starts with the fact that in their mind, Christ is not meeting the expectations of what they thought the Messiah was going to be.
Well, you've got a real ability to clarify stuff, Jeff. That's so good. And what I'm hearing you say is that expectation, it's like a domino effect. In my little picture, the 5 points, because of that expectation, they've already decided, they've already voted, thus here, position 2, position 3, position 4, position 5. And the best thing they know how to do is to exalt themselves, to state clearly their position. We are sons of Abraham, self-bolstering and mudslinging.
Yeah.
And I think we as humans get really good at it over time.
Yeah.
Especially as believer or unbeliever, we still do it. I think it's interesting. He's talking to people who have expressed faith. It really puts humanity into a whole different way to think about it here. He's talking to people who have expressed some level of belief, but they still have false expectations that they're going to, it's going to get worse than this in the text. So anyway, it's 8 o'clock. We'll let you guys go. And next week, we'll pick up. We'll move on. Verse 56. I can't remember. I think it's got 59 verses. And I think we've got another couple sessions left. I know we have Abraham seeing my day. That's coming up. That's fascinating. So
Did you say you weren't going to be available next week, or you are available?
no, thanks, Bill. I'm going to be in Las Vegas at a Generac conference, but I'm going to join you via my iPad, and I will be prepared to teach, but we may augment it a little bit differently, and I'll be there. I'll facilitate
Okay.
next week.
All right.
It may be a little different, but we'll move ahead. So, all right. Well, you guys have a good rest of your week, and we will see you next week. So, bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.